today's session is on mastering UI patterns in Drupal 10, building reusable and dynamic components. So basically you saw like experience builder, right? So it's not all about creating static pages using that, right? So building something reusable and dynamic at the same time. So this is a bit of introduction about me. I hope you see a mirror right here. So that's me on Drupal.org. So if you scan this, you can know more about me. So my alias is the Drupal kid on D.O, and I am a technical architect, a tech speaker. I've been GSOC mentor 2 times, and I'm training other like students and other folks. This is a bit about me, like where I belong from. I belong from foothills of Himalaya, a small town near Dharamshala. It's a very peaceful place. The Dalai Lama is there, so yeah, good to code. So my mantra of life is give a man a fish and you will feed him for a day, teach a man to fish and you feed him for a lifetime, right? So that I believe really, like, and it comes with Drupal, I would say, because someone came in my life, he taught me what is open source, came into my college, and now I'm doing the same thing, like I'm going to different colleges in India, universities in India, giving tech talks. So recently I've been to IIT Kanpur and I introduced them to Drupal. So yeah, so I got it from my mentors and I'm mentoring other folks. So this is pretty much about me. So before I begin, right, I just want to ask who all are familiar with the patterns theory, like the patterns lab? Anyone? Yeah? Yeah? Okay. So I hope like for those who know it, they know like it's not only with Drupal, right? It's a standard practice across you can say multiple platforms nowadays. Like if you talk about modern day frameworks, they also work on this theory, like React, Angular, right? So they're all based on this theory and they're creating like next gen UIs, like which is also based on this theory. What does this theory is? So it is very simple, right? So science behind is it like we'll just treat single components, like you can say single elements as atoms, then elements combine to become molecule, and then these elements, if they combine with other elements, right, and it creates an organism there. So holistically we see that as a component, right? So all these like combine and makes a component. So I'll just move ahead. So now it's a standard across, right? So what's introduction of UI patterns in Drupal, right? So what's in Drupal? So it's a module in Drupal, right? It's a standalone module and it also integrates with UI suite. So we have like it leverages SDC. Now SDC is also depreciated, right, going forward, and we'll be using UI patterns too. And it integrates with block layout, layout builder, and also like fields, views. So all these things it integrates with. So we have, like I've shown you the last theory, right? So it works on the same theory. So it has the components, then we have like it builds blocks and all other things, and then follow that. So now what's the core concept of using UI patterns? So it's a component driven development, right? So generally in Drupal, like if you install Drupal, it comes with a block driven, right? So if you use UI patterns, it will be a component driven and it will be more reusable, right? And more independent components will be there, so it will be like easier for anyone to create newer components using those elements, right? Pattern definitions, right? Reusable design and logic. Each pattern includes a template. We define variables and descriptions. Then decoupling is very easy because nowadays we use twig templates, right? And it's very hard to reuse the blocks we create and map it to the theming suggestions and all. It's very complex, but it makes it really easy. And there is an integration. You have patterns can integrate seamlessly with other Drupal modules, right? And paragraphs. Patterns are declared in YAML file, so I'll be showing you this, how you will create that. And it is fieldable and configurable also. So if you see here, like these are the benefits of using UI patterns, right? So you can have a consistency across your site, right? So if you have a component at one place, it will look and behave in the same way across the site. It also improves your development workflow. Why? Because you can reuse the same thing and you will not invest eventually the time, and it will save a lot of time for your development teams. Then reusability, scalability I talked about. Maintenance is very easy. Collaboration is very easy. You can create different prototypes. Performance is also one because bundling will be less, right? So we'll be talking about that. Content editor empowerment. So all of these things comes with UI patterns. So now UI patterns also has a UI suite in which you'll have like a holistic picture of component. Like if you building these components in Bootstrap, maybe a foundation framework or DaisyUI, right? So it's a suite of basically a theme. So you'll find a UI suite of Bootstrap, DaisyUI, right? So all that you'll have in the suite. So it will be a consisting of all these components. UI patterns to Bootstrap UI suite uses UI pattern 1 for now. UI style, skins and icons is common for all the other suites. So lot of the theory, now let's dive into code. So we'll be discussing how to create a reusable pattern, simple one, and what is just a distinguish between DaisyUI and Bootstrap UI. Using UI pattern library like storybooks we have in like the common standard workflow, right? So it is kind of that, but it is in Drupal, so I'll show you that as well. Modules that complement UI patterns, I'll be sharing the list of those modules so that you can further reuse it and make something really cool on that. Touch base on integration and development web component lit library. So basically I'll be talking about this at the end. So now integrating and reusing the component. So basically you create this YAML file, right, which has your name of your component, and then the other description will also be there. Then you see like the props here, right, and the variations. So if you see the YAML file, you have two things, variations and props. So variations is something like, suppose like you have a component and there are n number of variants, so you can create those variants there, and you can also create other properties like is a full weight carousel. So I'm just taking an example of carousel here. So these are the properties and variations of a carousel. So this is how the YAML looks like. This is the twig file. So now the properties we implemented in the YAML file will be used in the twig file just to differentiate how the variations will look like and what all properties will go inside the component. So once we have that all set up, like two things, and you can also have a CSS and JS file that I'll be talking about more in the when we'll touch base on the lit library, right, at the end. So once you have that, then if you see like this instance, DrupalCon Asia 24 has this block layout page, right? And on that block layout page, I'm trying to just embed this component. When I embed this component, it takes everything from the YML file. So the variant, you can select what variant you need, and then you can select what property also, like the vertical one I'm showing there. So once you select and embed that component, then something like this appears, right? So you have a component, browser component working on your screen. So now we'll also touch base on UI suite, DaisyUI and Bootstrap, which is the most used suites in UI pattern. So if you see like DaisyUI uses Tailwind CSS, right? Tailwind, who basically, if you guys don't know about Tailwind, it's just like predefined classes you can use in your HTML, and you just need not to write the CSS, because those classes will eventually have the CSS which ships with Tailwind. So if you see like Bootstrap, at the same time you have to write the CSS. So basically it is like you will have a more bundle size and all those things, because you are writing extra CSS, and maybe like it will not be that standard, because you will be writing the same CSS again and again, right? So you can see the similarities, the variations, and the conclusion is like Tailwind CSS, preferably like in DaisyUI, works really well, and it's a great choice with 2x. Most of us use Bootstrap, but like DaisyUI like is out of the box with Tailwind, so yeah, it's the preferred choice. If you want all-in-one framework with build components and JavaScript functionality, then Bootstrap UI 1x remains a solid and wise option there. So this is a storybook, right, which is, let's say in Drupal we call it UI patterns library. So it ships with like all the component documentation, right? So in storybook also a similar thing happens, right? So you create all the components and like what all properties they have and all the documentation related to it. So the same thing is there if you see the URL, right? And all the components it will give you, and it according to the component it will give you what all the properties it has and all the like needed information when you build a new component on your site, or like for development purpose or documentation purpose. So this is very useful for all the development team and other marketing folks as well, to just pictorially see like if they're designing a Figma, what it maps with the web, right? So it is very helpful. Other useful modules are like I've already discussed these, right? UI suite. UI example modules is you can download and see like in Bootstrap and Foundation UI how it goes. Pattern library module I have already discussed, right, which we saw just now. Component blocks is something like if you use UI pattern 1, right, it will not expose those components as blocks for you. So you have to use component blocks module. I have created a derivative for this like in past, right? So it is literally messy. Like when you install this, it comes with like duplicates of component blocks and all. But I have a like solution built in. So if you guys need that, just reach out to me. If you use that, UI skins, UI styles, and UI icons. So these are some of the useful modules which you guys can use. So I think that is it from my end, right? So credits to Nicole and my mentors. So if you want to reach out to me, just scan this code and you'll land up on my LinkedIn profile. Any questions? Yeah.
Coming from a design, okay, as someone designing in Figma, right? What would be your view for the design UI designer to prepare for before handoff?
So basically, when we see a Figma design, right? So like it starts from the very basic things, which is elements, which I just explained, right? So elements are like something H1 paragraph, right? So all the typography stuff, right? Then you have buttons and all. So they start with that, then they build a Figma UI, the components, right? The same way we will also start here, right? So it maps to your Figma to your web. Now you have a clear direction how to go, right?
Yeah. So would it be helpful if, as a designer,
Yeah.
to somehow create components, name them as close as possible to say for instance I'm supposed to design for Tailwind, right? To name the video as close as possible to how Tailwind would probably name the classes. I mean, is that helpful or it's really...
I would say like it will not be helpful because those are the classes, and what we are talking about is elements and components here, right?
Yeah.
So you can use those Tailwind classes inside your, like, just to style your elements and components, I would say, right? And eventually like the elements and components will be mapped to your Figma, right? So yeah, I would say no. Yeah.
A couple questions. Which one do you prefer, Daisy, Bootstrap, or what was the other one?
Foundation framework.
Yeah.
So it is based on your use case, right? So what you need. So basically, if you need maybe like if you want to write, because Tailwind comes with its own classes, right? So if you want to have your own CSS, maybe something custom, and Tailwind does not provide you that, right? So I would say Bootstrap is a good choice, and you have extensive JavaScript, right? Then in that case, Bootstrap is a great choice. But if you want like something like very performant and very easy to use, then I think DaisyUI, and it has a learning curve because you have to also learn Tailwind at the same time, right, to reuse it.
The other question was about the component library that you listed, and it was showing all the components that you built for your site. Is that just a module?
That's a page which ships with UI patterns. Yeah, so yeah, you can just visit that page, and all the components which you have created inside your code in a template components directory will be listed there automatically.
Thank you. I have two questions. One is the carousel sounds great. However, have you experienced or challenges about tracking? We feel it's difficult when we implement the carousel for marketing campaign to do the tracking, and how to reflect, especially for the event tracking, specifically for how many people already visited the second or third carousels, something like that. Yeah.
So if I understood the question correctly, so it is basically an analytics question, right? So basically, let's say you have 3 different components, who visited where and how many times, right? Okay, so this is something like where like GTM comes into place, right? Google Tag Manager. So you have to have those events mapped to your components, right? So that, let's say you have a carousel and you have buttons in there, right? So when someone clicks on it, there will be a event fired to your GTM, right? And you'll have that analytics there. So this will not eventually help you out like for the analytics. It's just how you create a good UI, right? It's a UI practice, I would say.
Yeah, thank you. I would just, if actually there is no button because you set up an auto rotating of the carousel. So
Yeah.
And yeah, if anyone have experience on tracking, please just contact me offline.
Yeah, so carousel, if you visit, like, right, you can fire those events like when you are visiting that particular section or a page, right? So you can also configure those events based on your needs. So it's not only the click, it will work, right?
Yeah, but different areas, I would say, very specific.
Yeah. So it will be like what you want is kind of a heat map, right, where you see where user is clicking and all that. For I think for that you have different tools which tracks like on the page where all they are visiting.
Okay. Yeah, and we do have like a Mosquito heat maps as well
Yeah.
currently. Second question is, I do feel sometimes developer feels hesitate to develop a component rather than just using model because it's a balance to say where the business requires it or how many times, because it sounds like the components need more coding and more adaptable. How's your view or experience on this?
So yeah, similar challenges. I think I would say like most of us face this is a very good question, right? So developers often hesitate to build components and maybe like they will do something of their own, right? So yeah, I also encountered few of those challenges, but I would say like it should come from the top, right? So if you're building a Figma, you're giving the requirement to the developer, it should be well defined in the Figma how it maps to your like UI pattern library, right? So once QA tests it, right, so he'll have a clear direction what to test, right? So yeah, and in code reviews also you have to be very aligned, and the communication plays a really vital role here, right? So your team has to communicate really well, right? Because if there is a communication gap, then maybe code review will not map to, right, what the business is asking, right? So basically we are building, we already have a component, we are building something very new, right? So that cannot be analyzed on a UI level. So maybe they'll use the same code and paste it again, right? So you will not be able to analyze it while you see the UI. So best practice is like you review your code properly, that it is going into the right direction, right? Yeah.
Hello. I've got a few questions. I'm still a little bit confused about the design, the library. So for a designer that doesn't know anything about Drupal, do they need to contact that developer to see the examples page so they can build the Figma based on those examples? Or how do they prepare or build a Figma so that it's easier for the developers to implement those examples from the UI?
I would say this is opposite what you said, right? So developers have to follow the design, but your design should be componentized first, right? So let's say they have to give them proper elements, right? Then they have to give them a proper components, right? And they have to use those components and name those components in your Figma so that they can follow the same, right? Otherwise it will be very difficult because your designer will reach out to a developer, and if he is building something new, they'll change the Figma and whole things gets messed up. So that's why I say like it should come from the top, right? So when you are initially designing, so they should set the standard for everyone.
So the developer gives the designer a storybook, and then the designer takes that and then customize.
No, developer will not give, right? Designer will give the Figma. Let's say you have a slider component, right? So that slider component will be used in a number of pages. So if we say it's a slider component, right, the naming convention should be the same mapped to the UI pattern. So when developer will take it, right, so they'll say, okay, in the Figma we have this, so we need to have a similar component in your UI pattern library, right?
Oh, okay. I think maybe I misunderstood. So the developer creates the components from scratch based on the Figma. They don't
Yes.
use the example.
Yes.
Oh, okay. Cool. I've got a few other questions. In the comparison, it said the Daisy was a utility first framework. What does utility first mean?
So basically, like it comes with Tailwind, right? So Bootstrap, like it has its own utility which it is already using. You need not to. You can integrate Tailwind with Drupal, right? But it ships with that. So that's what it means.
So, sorry. So I know I've used Bootstrap in Smidge. It has like kind of components already with some classes that you just like copy and paste, and then those classes make the width or something. So it's like some classes that the Tailwind has, but they're not like implemented; they're just available. Is that what you? That's the difference. Like,
Yeah, you need, eventually if there is something which is not available, you have to write it. But there are some standard classes, right, which we generally use are already there. So those utilities are already provided by Tailwind, so you need not to write that again and again. So like let's say text center, right? So there is a property called text center. You need not to write text center on the CSS again and again. You have a class for it. You just use it and your text will be centered, right? So yeah.
Oh, okay, they're the utilities, right?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. And can you give us like a very brief summary of what DaisyUI is?
So DaisyUI it's like a framework like your Bootstrap, right? So basically it ships with Tailwind, so it is very easy and it is the package size is very less, right? When you eventually build your theme. So if you are using a single page application kind of, right? So I would say like DaisyUI is a very good choice. But if you are using multi-page and if you want to have a larger application, maybe Bootstrap is more adaptable also, right, across. So if you are already using Bootstrap, then you have to go with Bootstrap, right? So it is a better choice there.
I think I kind of got it. Cool. Oh yeah, last question, sorry. I saw in the YAML, you can define like your settings for your components. Is this like a tick box or something? Is it easy to say I want to provide some defaults when as a developer? Is it easy to put some code on the page to generate the default for those YAML files? Like in Drupal, you have a hook form alter. You can just like is that integrated with the component?
Yeah, so there I showed you variations, right? So that is something very cool, because if you have a slider and you have maybe like 5 variations of a slider, you will not create slider again and again, right? You just have to create a variation there and just use that variation.
So I don't, I can't write any like PHP code to pre-populate the content. Yeah, like this is the component.
Default text, is that
Yeah, like maybe like I can choose some drop down which pre-populates like 5 settings. So I have like 5 presets, I guess. Well, one preset which populates 5 settings, and I can choose from drop down. Then it will like fill it in, I guess. Rather than me going, okay, well, if it's an important component, then the heading is a bold, and next one is the area is red. This thing is it needs a picture field filled in. Otherwise, it's optional. This kind of like.
Right. So here like UI pattern is because this is what we are talking about, data, right? So that is the real essence of UI patterns, right? It decouples you with the data, right? So if it decouples, like you are already having a decoupled site, right, internally in Drupal. So that's the real essence. So we should not be doing that, like passing the variables again from PHP, but it should be like passed from the UI itself, right, to be ingested in the component. So the component should only be responsible for displaying the information, right? It should not be created based on the data. So let's say you have a default in some drop down, so it should go as a property into the component, so that it sets it as a default, right? So there will be some object, right, for those properties, and it will have a default, so it recognizes that and sets as a default if there is a property, right?
Oh, okay. So I might do my logic in Twig or something, I guess.
Yeah, so yeah, it works really well with Twig, what you say, right? Because it is coupled with Twig, right? But if you use UI patterns, that means, right, we want decoupling so that we can build reusable components.
Oh, okay. I think I kind of missed it. Okay, thanks.
So thanks everyone. Like I think that's it from my end.
Thank you.
Mm.